Hey, in this episode of Franchise Secrets, I have my friend and business partner with me, Bobby Brennan, and he is a master, a genius when it comes to franchise development. He knows franchising inside and out, and so you will learn what to do, how to do due diligence on a brand, what you should know from a franchisee's perspective as a prospective franchisee, and as a franchisor when you're thinking about everything franchise development. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Bobby.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Bobby, welcome to the show again.
Thanks for having me, Erik. Always a pleasure.
It's nice that we're business partners over at Front Street. So all I have to do is just say, Stacy, get Bobby on the podcast because we got some good stuff to talk about. And boom, you're on. So let's help some people out on this one. In that Franchise Secrets Facebook group, there's always seems to be buyers coming in, people that want to buy a franchise. And I'm always wanting to try to help them, but I realize the best way for me to help a lot of people is just to have a podcast that we record on a particular topic where it's just us talking and they could just kind of sit and listen versus me having a call with somebody, because I don't do that anymore. Or worse, people just kind of accidentally stumbling their way into buying a franchise, which is like the worst thing that they could do. So
Sure.
What are some of your initial thoughts when you hear somebody say, I want to buy a franchise? What goes through your mind? Like initially, what goes through your mind? Because when we talk about people wanting to franchise their brand, Jeff and I tell people all the time, like, first rule of franchise, don't franchise your business because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're getting into. When you hear somebody say, I want to buy a franchise, what are some initial things that come into your mind?
I want to know how self-aware they are, right?
Yeah.
Can they do it? Are they willing to do it, right? Like there's 5 criteria I think about from a franchisor's perspective as we're awarded franchises. And it starts with culture fit, finding the right culture fit, the financial fit, right? Because some people opening a $2 million franchise is a great option for them. Other people need to open a $200,000 franchise. So the financial fit. And then I think, can they do it? Do they have the skill set to be an entrepreneur? Because you're a business owner as a franchisee. And then are they willing to do it? Because they might be able to do it. I know a lot of people that are able, but are they actually willing to do the work? Business ownership's not easy. And franchising expedite makes it easier. You're building on systems and processes and those that have done it before. So you're not recreating the wheel. You're learning from someone else's mistakes and successes. And then lastly is, are they going to find someone to work with? Are they going to be easy to work with as a franchisor? So are they self-aware of those things? They may not have those 5 criteria, but are they self-aware enough to know, hey, I could do this. I'm willing to do the work. I'm gritty. Financially, I'm able to do it. And if not, then I'm really digging into, let's talk about these things, and find out what their interests lie, what they're looking for. Because I grew up in the health and sports background and, kind of that category. I don't know if I want another one of those franchises, even though it was a great fit for me before. I'm still very passionate. I went to the gym this morning, right? But I don't know if I necessarily want to own another one of those too. So really making sure that they're digging into themselves and asking the right questions, which I know Franchise Secrets does a great job of providing a ton of those questions. So if you guys don't get the list of validation questions from Erik, the questions ask any franchisor, because those are extremely helpful, but just being self-aware is probably the number one thing. And then obviously it breaks down to, a couple different categories within that.
We're going to get into things like, once you realize you want to buy a franchise, there's different ways to do it. You can use brokers, you could do online research, you get on newsletters, you can talk to people that own brands, you can get on, look at the different magazine lists. There's all kinds of things. So we're going to kind of break those down individually. But when I first talk to somebody and they say, hey, I want to buy a franchise, I'm just like, do you even know what you want to do? And they want the dream, but they don't know everything that it takes to get there. And I think in some ways they're set up for the deck is stacked against a buyer. And sometimes in the
Sure.
group, people are like, no, it's not. And other people are like, yes, it is. And I think it is because you got a great salesperson on the other end, like you or your team. And there's a lot of other good people. But if they're really good, they're looking out for the brand's best interest, which is what you were talking about, the right fit, the skill set, the willingness to do it, the financial fit. But if you get somebody that's a good salesperson in the brand that doesn't have the right criteria in selecting the right franchisees, that is set up for disaster. And you and I've seen that happen.
They're selling versus awarding franchises. And that's really a big, they're getting sold. And again, sometimes people see it as, hey, well, I get to make the baby, but I don't raise it. That's what a lot of the salespeople think like is I get to make the baby. I'll do the fun part, but I don't get to raise the baby.
That'll be a good clip. That'll be a good clip we'll put out there in a reel.
Yeah, I love it. Right. Make it PG. But no, that's really, you're right. It can be challenging as somebody coming in because there's thousands, like literally thousands of franchise opportunities out there. And all their FDDs probably look fairly comparable because the Federal Trade Commission requires they follow these certain items. So it may look good, but when you get behind the curtains, it may not be. But how do you even get in front of the right brands to find what maybe the next big thing is going to be? Because what's big in 2 years, a lot of people will have never heard of today.
Well, let's start there because I want to go down this tangent of kind of how they even find out if they're getting sold or they're getting awarded, because the best salespeople say they're getting awarded a franchise and they all say the same thing. They'll have to say the same words, but you really don't know until you're on the other end of it. But we've probably got some things that we could help the folks out with to know if they're getting sold or they're getting awarded, like truly. Well, but when people start, they want to buy a franchise. Usually they find a broker, or they're doing some online research, or they see an Inc. magazine or an Entrepreneur magazine or FBR or something that says this is a top list. So let's start with brokers. Let me start with my favorite thing to do is throw some brokers under the bus. In the Facebook group, someone comes in and they say, hey, I want to buy a franchise. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. And I just see brokers salivating. New brokers that need leads, need the money, and they see this as fresh meat. They're ready to go after them. And I know this because I get screenshots of the DMs, and people get kicked out of the Facebook group when they start DMing like that because they're harassing people that just want to learn. So in their mind though, Bobby, in the broker's mind, they are just there to help. All they're doing,
of course,
is there to help. But anyway, point of all that is all brokers not created equal. All brokers are not the same. And we're not even going to talk about broker networks because there's different broker networks. And here's what I see as truth in the broker network community. All of these broker networks have some really good consultants, brokers that are part of that and that do the majority of the placements and are really good all the way around. And they got the middle of the pack, and then they got underperformers. So different groups have varying different degrees of like how many are weighted towards the top and the bottom, et cetera.
Sure.
So we're just going to kind of group brokers, consultants in the new ones, the good ones, the bad ones, top performers. Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisor and you're frustrated that you're not awarding as many franchises as you thought you would, this is the reason I created the Franchisor Mastermind. If you want access to the information, the techniques that the best franchise sales organizations are using to award franchises, and you want what mature brands have with their playbook of having happy, successful franchisees that grow the right way, then you might want to check out the Franchisor Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections. They want the playbook to achieve both short-term and long-term success. They want to increase enterprise value in their brand. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. So, how does somebody know that they are working with a really good broker or consultant? How would they know? What should they do?
Well, I got to rewind a little bit, Eric, because you forgot a really good way for people to find franchises is through great podcast as well.
Oh, yes.
Right? Come on. Shameless self-plug there.
Yes.
But no, I really, you're 100% correct that, on the franchise development side, we sometimes joke that it's a name and a phone number. Like that is what you may get in some instances. And again, that may be a lead from a broker, but a true broker is going to provide value not only to the franchise candidate, but they're going to provide, more of a confidential questionnaire, something that is inside of what that person's why is. So back to your question of what's the first thing I think when people want to start a franchise? The other part is what's their why? Why do you want to start a franchise? Why do you want to be in business for yourself? Finding out that why is so important. And it goes back to the self-awareness. They need to know that too. But if I don't know that why, if someone's working with a broker and the broker doesn't know the why for that candidate, how can they really match that person up with the right fit brand if they don't know what's important to them? Hey, here's what's hot, right? That's one way, but chances are that's never going to be a good fit. It could be, but that's the exception. So making sure you're working with a good broker, I would recommend a couple things. Number one is how long have they been doing it? Ask that question. Hey, help me understand how'd you get into this? What have you been doing? You don't have to specifically ask how long you've been doing it, but if you're working with a broker, find someone that's reputable. Maybe look at their content online. Do they put out content online? I think that's important. And do you vibe with their communication style? They may have different brokers or different brands or different franchisors. Most of them work with hundreds, if not thousands of franchisors. But what really happens is they find the 10 or 20 brands that they know do really well. And from there, they trust, right? They can't know everything about every single brand out there. They're going to know a lot about a little. That makes sense. They're going to know a lot of things across franchising, but they're not going to go deep. They're not going to know a ton about each of these brands. So they can't tell you the financials or what they're going to do or how you're going to do.
They shouldn't be telling you the financials.
They should not be. They should not be.
Their job.
Right. Not their job. That's the franchise development team or the internal brand's job to explain if they have an item 19, what's in there. So again, that's a red flag. If someone's telling you how much money you're going to make as a broker, to me, I wouldn't talk to them. Now they can say I've had franchisees that were successful. You can talk to those folks and validate that with existing franchise partners. Absolutely. That's fine, but they should not be making any financial performance claims on behalf of the brand. So
you're on a roll. Keep going. I got some rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah. But so make sure that they've got reputation. Look for potential people they've worked with. Go on their LinkedIn. Look at recommendations they've made. Hey, that might have been 2 or 3 years ago, but send a message to that person. Hey, I'm thinking about working with XYZ broker. Would love to pick your brain on your experience. Like, do your due diligence. And then if you're going to do it, then commit to one. Don't be the person that works with 5 real estate brokers. Don't be that person that works with 5 different ones because none of them are going to think you're serious. And you're really not going to really truly connect and open up with them. So I break it down to a couple things. Do your due diligence on them. Look for referrals. Ask for referrals even that you can talk to about the experience. And make sure they're not pushing you. They shouldn't be trying to sell you something. To your point, great brokers are going to educate. They're going to help educate. They're going to help you maybe find out if it's not a good fit. Some of the best franchise brokers I've worked with have very real conversations. They build trust first, and that trust allows them to have tough conversations that, hey, it doesn't seem like your actions are aligning with your words. Are you really ready for franchise ownership? And before it would ever get to a franchise brand, sometimes they weed that person out because they say they're not a good fit. Now, the right ones will educate you on what the process should look like. Hey, here's what to expect as you go through the process. So you're not blindsided because seeing an FDD for the first time can be intimidating. Seems like they're going to take your firstborn. And if anything goes wrong, you're getting thrown under the bus. And in reality, that's how all franchise agreements are written, because their job is to protect the franchise system, not one individual franchisee. So those are just a couple things you can do to make sure you're working with a good broker. But there's a ton of them out there. So it's worth doing your due diligence.
He mentioned so much there. What do you think about asking a broker, brands that they've been doing it at any, here's my opinion. If they've been doing it for any length of time, they've seen some brands that they thought might be amazing and they turned out to not be amazing. In other words, they might have placed some people in some wrong brands thinking they're doing the right thing. I was having a conversation with somebody about this the other day, and they were a broker. It was a private conversation. Actually, it might have been a public conversation podcast that I was on. But they've seen brands come and go because they've been around for quite a while. So they've seen failure. Maybe they've experienced failure as a franchisee themselves. Would that disqualify them or make them better as a consultant, seeing failures and really recognizing that there were failures on the brand's part and it wasn't just the franchisee's fault? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really great point. I've even seen some of the franchise brokers that, they drank the Kool-Aid themselves. They bought into a brand that they were, educating, potential clients on and presenting that brand to them. And they bought in themselves, and maybe it turned out not to be as good as we thought. Like, there's no promise in life. There's always going to be risk associated with any business. Franchise ownership should compress that. But especially, that's one of the challenges with some emerging brands is, hey, are they putting their money where their mouth is? Have they owned a franchise before? Have they been involved in a franchise that wasn't successful? Like, to me, it's a yellow flag. I won't call it a red flag, but I'll say it's a yellow flag. Is okay, hey, are they still showing that type of brand? Is that still something that they would be participating in today? If they're still going for what's the next hottest thing that seems to be flying off the shelf, again, that everybody's buying, and there's no proof of concept. Well, to me, that broker hasn't necessarily learned their lesson, right? Now, if there's proof of concept, there are brands that grow like crazy. I've been a part of several of them, and they were fantastic brands. But again, you don't really know until you get those locations open. So it's a yellow flag, I would say, but
I think what you're looking for is honesty. You want a broker that's honest with you about that. The outcome is the outcome, but you want them to say like, hey, this is what I've learned. This is what I've seen. This is how I'm doing things differently. And just be open about it. If they've said, I've placed hundreds of people in brands and all of them are successful, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
I don't know how that could be true. It might be true, but I don't know how that could be true.
Unlikely. And here's a great example. Like, in my past, when I first got into the franchise development, there were people that we probably awarded more territory to than we should have.
Yep.
We weren't as strict. It was a younger brand.
That's a common mistake of young emerging brands, is awarding bigger territories and bigger territory or more territories than they should. That's common out there.
Territory will make you money or it will cost you money as a franchisee. And we saw it early on that we might have awarded 5 or 10 units to somebody that realistically, on paper, they met the requirements. But if it's a brick and mortar, how likely are they going to actually open all those locations? Like, that's a challenge to open up 10 locations unless they have the means and the team. And Eric, you and I have talked about that before. Like, that's important. So I think if that person had bought half as many territories, well, now they've got working capital. That the number one reason I see franchises fail in most cases is they don't have enough time. The runway was too short. Obviously, you're going to have some where the franchisee have life circumstances. They don't want to put in the work, whatever it may be. But for those that are actually putting in the work, it's usually they just didn't give themselves enough of a runway and they were undercapitalized. So sometimes buying less territory can set a franchise up for success. But again, there's also the double-edged sword of, hey, well, if I don't purchase these now, are the territories going to be sold out because it is a fast-moving brand? So there's no right or wrong balance. But that, in my opinion, that broker, that consultant should really be digging in and sometimes even telling you what you're not willing to acknowledge yourself. So for example, if I have a candidate that's looking 3 territories or 4, I'll ask them, hey, is 4 giving you heartache? Is that going to make things too tight financially? If they answer yes, I said, you have your decision right there. I will tell you the salesperson who is paid off of how many territories you purchase is telling you to buy less territories. You have your answer, in my opinion.
Yep.
And that's how I think a broker should be taking that approach as well and looking out for what is the long-term success. If they do a good job, and this is something I would ask brokers too, how much of their business comes from referrals? and ask to talk to some of those referrals. Because if they do a great job, I'm telling everybody I know, if they help place me into a successful franchise that was a good fit for me and I'm making money, I'm going to tell everybody to go talk to that broker because they did right by me. So that's a huge piece. If they do it the long term, they're going to have way more referrals and they're not, having to necessarily message random people on social media. Like a lot of their business will come from referrals.
Yeah. Yep. That's very true. You mentioned something earlier about not working with more than one broker at a time. And I think that is, that's something that brokers will appreciate this. I think they will. Again, my background, I was a consultant for years. And one of the top ones. So I know the broker community inside and out. And the reasons why you want to work with one versus a bunch is they'll start when they find out that you're working with more, then they're really going to sell you hard, and they're just going to give you more brands. Some of them will just give you more brands. Some of them will just try to sell you on one brand and they're in sales mode, or it's easy to get in sales mode and try to push them because now they're competing against somebody else giving you a lot of the same brands that they could give you. So it's really not good for you as the franchise buyer to work with more than one. I think and again, with that open, transparent conversation, if you are not telling that broker that you're looking at others and whatnot, then now you're the one that's not being open and transparent. You want transparency with the broker and truthfulness with them. But if you're not giving that to them, then you're asking for something that you're not really reciprocating. So I think, example, people come into the Franchise Secrets Facebook group and they say, they raise their hand, I'm a franchise buyer. Myself or my assistant will reach out and say, hey, are you currently looking at franchises, or is it something you want to do, down the road? No, I want to buy a franchise. And there's certain questions we ask them. Number one, are you working with a consultant or broker? If that's the case, we say, great. And that's it. And they say no, then I have other questions that I ask them. Do you have $75,000 to $100,000 of liquid capital? If it's a yes, then I ask them, are you ready to buy in the next 3 months? Not just like, if you found the right brand, are you ready to buy in the next 3 months? And how much time do you have to give to the business? If it's less than 10 hours a week, I don't really see any opportunities out there for them. There might be, but I don't really know of any that really helps them be set up for success with that. I'd like to see 20 hours a week randomly at any given time that they could devote to that. So if they have $100,000 liquid, they're ready to buy in the next 3 months if they find the right one. And if they can, they're not working with a broker, and they have the time, I will send them to a broker or 2 or 3 that are really people that I trust. When I say trust, I mean somebody that I would send my sister to or my mom to, or, and I know that they will take care of them. And that list is really short. But, if I think about things like that. But if they're working with a broker, they'll never, I won't send them to anybody because I really believe just work with one broker, one consultant. But I think once you're around, and then here's some other advice. Don't just ask in a Facebook group who are the best brokers, because what happens, and I see it. Brokers will come in there and tell you how great they are, and they'll DM you. If you're getting DM'd in a Facebook group, most consultants don't have time to be able to DM people to ask to work with them. Or they have their friends going in there, and I see this, and I know it's happening. Their friends are going in there and saying, I recommend so-and-so. They're so amazing. And that's not a real endorsement of somebody that they work with. And there are some real endorsements that come in there. But how do you know as a buyer? You don't. So if you found someone, you're talking to a brand and they work and they found, or you meet some people that know brokers, ask them and they can probably refer you to some really good brokers. But referral is so great. And then, like you said, follow them on social media, follow them on LinkedIn and Facebook, just see what they're like and see if they are talking about their knowledge of franchising, their experience in franchising, the deals that they're doing, meaning placements that they're doing, if they're doing that, then there's probably a pretty good sign that it's a broker that's reputable. There's a lot of good ones out there, but there's way more inexperienced ones.
Well, and to add to that, I think, if it's important to you, make sure they've owned a franchise, or what is their background outside of the franchise consulting. If they just got into this last month because they looked at franchises and thought that looked fun, right? Like, again, that person's not going to provide the same value as someone who's been doing this for a decade. So again, follow them on social, get on their YouTube or LinkedIn or podcast or, newsletter and see, do you align with the content? Does it speak to you? Because yes, while I recommend working with one franchise broker at a time, it doesn't mean that you're married to that person. Yeah. If it's not a good fit and it doesn't feel right, just like any relationship, like cut it off, but just be honest. Hey, this isn't really working out for me. I'm going to move in a different direction and go find somebody else. But it is frustrating, I think, from everybody's perspective, even from a franchisor. If I know someone's looking at 2 different brands with 2 different brokers, it makes me immediately think this person's not serious. Yeah. It's hard for me to believe they're going to be serious if they're dating multiple people, telling everyone they want to marry them. That's how I look at it.
All right, let's talk about money real quick, and then we're going to go into some of the other ways to start finding franchise brands. So I like people have $100,000 liquid, because a lot of the brands are probably $300,000 or less. Now there's some that are less expensive, 150, and you probably need 75,000 or, but so I go to a broker the other day. Well, somebody came into the Facebook group the other day, and I knew a little bit more about their background because of the information that they filled out to come into the group. But they're like, hey, I've got this much net worth, which was not a lot, and I'm looking at getting an SBA loan, but they're going to they're going to tag my house as collateral for the loan, and my wife's not too thrilled about that, and there's a lot that goes in there, but people are just like, take the risk, do it, take the risk. And others were like, no, you're an idiot, don't do it. It wasn't quite that extreme, but I knew, so I could do a broker about it on their podcast, as I was a guest on their podcast. And he said, he's kind of got a rule of thumb, don't invest more than half of your net worth into a brand. And using that litmus test for this particular one, they shouldn't do it. Unless you're 19 years old or 20 years old, but I just hate to see people get excited and getting sold and wanting that dream and leaving their current situation that they hate so bad that they're making a bad decision.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's extremely relevant and it happens, right? People get excited or a brand's moving quickly and they feel the pressure and they want to sign up, but you're absolutely right. Again, maybe if they're owner operator, maybe that's different for me. But if they're planning on hiring a general manager and going to spend and they're light on net worth and liquidity, or this is going to be more than half of their total, especially if it's a home, if it's not liquid capital, they can access quickly. Then again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but I think that's a great rule of thumb is that you should spend more than half of your net worth. And if you're under 100,000 liquidity, let's be honest, a franchise fee can be anywhere from 30 to 80 grand. That's going to eat up most of your liquid. That's typically coming from liquid capital that's required when you sign the franchise agreement. And then the bank's going to want some post-closing liquidity too. So again, it goes back to being undercapitalized. So I agree that anything under 100,000 is going to be an exception to the rule. And I'm personally going to probably want to see that person needs to be in the day-to-day of the business 40, 50 hours a week, because nobody's going to treat the business as well as the owner is. And they're going to have a higher probability of success if everything's riding on that for them. Now, again, as long as they're self-aware and they have the skill set, they have the work ethic, those things are going to make them successful. But I think it's really important that people don't, again, you talked about 8 to 10 hours. People like the idea of a passive investment. And I hear them all the time. I've not seen many passive investments. Throw your money in the stock market is literally what I will tell people. If they say, I don't want to do any work and I want to make money, don't buy a franchise. Go buy real estate. Go put your money in the stock market. I have not found a model that is absentee ran in a franchise, no matter what the franchisors may claim. I'm not saying they're not out there. I just haven't found them personally or feel confident enough to say, yep, that would be a great franchise concept. Because again, why are they franchising if they don't need anyone to do the work? That's my disconnect there. It could be some head trash, but I just really encourage people to think whatever time you think you're going to need to spend into it, budget more.
So, Boy, we haven't been able to get past brokers yet. There's more ways. I had just on that point that you just made, I was talking to a broker consultant about 3 years ago, got into a big argument with him. Not real big argument, but I'm like, dude, are you serious? You think that this thing's absentee? It's like, yeah, they have the manager for you, and all you do is just put up the money, and this is awesome. And he was a consultant. He's like, yeah, so I've helped a ton of people get into this thing. This is amazing. And I'm getting into it myself. So he believes it, right? So he believes, he's not just trying to sell it just to do it. He believes it. And then a year later, I'm like, dude, how's it going? He's like, don't know yet. Don't fully know. I'll know in a little bit, but there's been some bumps in the road, which bumps in the road are okay, because there's always, anytime you buy something, there's going to be bumps in the road as a business owner or whatnot. And then 2 years later, he's like, I'm giving these away. I'm out. I'm giving these away. They are not able to do what they said they were going to do. And I'm out. And he lost a ton of money. I want to say 7 figures. I want to say high 6 figures, maybe 7 figures, because he believed it. So here's a broker selling this to people. Now, helping people look at it, not necessarily selling it. And then bought the drink the Kool-Aid himself, and then realized it was bad. Good thing about it, he realizes it and he's changed his way. And so I'm like, okay, good on him. But the point of it is, there's a lot of people in the, that got hurt because they believed it's semi-absentee. And I do a lot of passive investing, and there's a reason it's called passive investing. Like there are people out there running it. I don't know why a franchisor would need franchisees to be the passive investor, like raise money, and open them up like that. It's not a franchise. So there's something that I don't understand with that. And it might just be my lack of knowledge or my own, like you said, own head trash. And there might be stuff out there right now that is what they claim it's going to be. But based on what I've seen, I have not seen it work yet. I haven't seen everything, but what I have seen, it has not worked, has not turned out well. And I would want to see it like 3 years down the road. The problem is all the territories are going to be gone. They're going to be gone, but then they're going to come back. Right. There's very few franchises out there, Bobby, that have sold out all their territories and there's nothing available anymore. Most brands, they sell out and then people aren't opening them. Even successful brands sell out, and then you can buy out other franchisees, and there's free territory, not free. There's available territories to purchase. That's something that I learned the hard way. I tried to buy too much at one time. There's only really one brand I think that I know of that you can't really do that with. Little Orange Theory, you can't do that because they have area developers and they're sold out. And then Crumble, it was really hard to get in, but now I see stuff starting to become available with that brand. So you might not be able to get, so it's a risk. It's a huge risk to get into a brand that's really not that proven. Proven with 1 or 2 is not really that proven. You have to be somebody that is a risk taker to get involved with a brand like that. And there's big paydays when it pays off. But if you can't risk that much, you don't have that high risk tolerance, then wait. And you might lose out on the best thing in the world, the 1 in a million, the moonshot. You might miss out on it, but I've only seen that happen once, and that's trouble.
Well, the people that are taking those moonshots, those are the ones that win. You talk to the first franchisees with Crumble, the first franchisees with Orange Theory, like they joined before it was proven too. Yeah. They knew they were taking a higher risk, and they got a higher reward. They got the best territory. Sometimes they got preferred area developer agreements and things like that, so they can develop it. But you mentioned a great point. Like you may be passive, but you guys have an active partner in the business, and I've done that before as well. I've been the active partner when there were passive investors running franchises. You need somebody running the day to day, and I like them to have skin in the game. Again, if a franchisor tells me they're going to give me a general manager and you're going to pay them this much, like what happens if they leave? Like they have no incentive. And so, the dream's free, the hustle's sold separately.
All right. So brokers, sum that up. You need to get with a good one. If you don't feel like you're with one of the great ones, it's easy. Say, I'm not working with you anymore. Let them know, and then go find somebody else. And you learn something along the way. All right. Another way to, if you're out there and you're like, I want to buy a franchise, here's something to think about if in your mind. Are you a franchise buyer or are you a franchise professional looker? There's a lot of lookers out there. They're like, they call themselves buyers, but they are a looker, meaning they are not really ready to buy. If they get in there and research and come to the point where it's time to buy, because you just can't go through a process for more than 3 months and not make a decision. The franchisor is going to be like, if you can't make a decision, you're out, and you're probably out forever because we don't want you. Yeah, you're not serious. So you've got to be serious when you start engaging with these brands, meaning you're going to buy in the next 3 months, or you have the ability to buy in the next 3 months if you find the right brand. And so that's a big question that I ask people. So whatever you're doing, if you're just doing online research, which we'll talk about right now, you're just out there snooping online, Googling stuff in the Googler, and and that's research, and that's fine to do. But once you start engaging with the brand, you go onto their website and you talk to their franchise development person. Like, there's a process that they take you through: a beginning, a middle, and the end. And the end is, do they like you? Are you in? And do you like them? Are you in or are you out? And that's a decision that has to be made from both sides. Could you imagine flip it around on the franchisee buyer? They're like, hey, I'm ready to buy. Like, I am ready to buy. And the franchisor is like, we're just looking at lookers right now. We are not ready to sell any. Sorry. Like, that's frustrating. And that's not, but on the franchisees do it all the time. They're like, hey, I'm not really ready to buy. They lie to themselves in so many different ways of why they are not buying. But the truth of it is, they're scared, or they were just never a buyer to begin with. So just go into it ready to buy and tell yourself the truth. Are you a buyer if you find the right one in the next 3 months? Or do you just want to look? If you just want to look, I think before you even talk to a broker, online research is the place to do it. So before you even talk to a broker, start researching online. When you know you're a buyer in the next 3 months, if you find the right one, that's when you might want to look at a broker. So let's talk about online research. You Google in the Googler. What do you Google? What are you really looking for when you're looking, Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, like, people will go to, and even the Googler, but they'll go to, like, what are brands that I already know, like, and trust? So one of the brands that we work with, Erik, has raving fans, and the vast majority of the 50 franchises.
Tell them what it is. I mean, it's a brand that it's our friends, one of our portfolio brands at Front Street. We got 2 of them. GoGlow.
Yeah.
It's you tell them about the 2 brands just in 30 seconds or less. That way they know when we bring it up, they know who we're talking about.
Yeah, we've got 2 brands in the Front Street portfolio today. One of them is GoGlow, which is a proprietary custom sunless tan, no UV rays, natural plant-based ingredients, proprietary formula, great business model. They are the dry bar of sunless tanning. Custom spray tans. They do it clean. They do one service really, really well. Super efficient business model. Great launch strategy. Then you've got Magnolia Soap and Bath Co., which is going to be more of your natural plant-based ingredients. It's retailtainment. So it's experiential retail. They make 90% of the products in the store. So a big community-based business where they're locally handcrafted products, natural ingredients, and it's focused on, like, a Southern hospitality, just great customer service. They want to be the Chick-fil-A of soap and bath retail products. But Magnolia, they started in middle of nowhere, Mississippi. And we now have 20 plus locations in Mississippi or Alabama nearby. And almost all of those franchise partners were customers first. They were raving fans that literally tried bar soap, tried a laundry soap, and said, I need to be a part of this. I want to own the franchise, because they knew their why. The brand was more than just soap. We're community impact, we're Southern charm, locally handcrafted. It's a different experience. We just happened to sell soap. And those people joined on, but the vast majority of those people were customers. So you might even look at, just like those Magnolia franchisees did, what are brands that I already am obsessed with and love? Maybe some of those are franchises. Franchising is not just food, and car washes and what hotels, what people may think. There's a lot of other concepts that you probably go to today that they're franchises. You may not even know it. So that's one part to even stay. So again, for new franchisors as well, They should put now franchising on every single piece of collateral that goes out there, because customers may love it. If you drive by, you see those trucks that say now franchising or franchise opportunities available. Look at those things. But then when you're going online, go ahead.
So you hear something like this on a podcast. So Bobby just talked about 2 of our brands, and next year we'll have probably 4 or 5 more brands in 2024. But you hear on a podcast, a brand, you're like, that's interesting. And again, you're a looker, not a buyer. You're like, then Google it and see what they say. It's okay, and see what's said about them out there. One of the first things that you probably want to do is go and look at their corporate location, see where they are corporately. Like Go-Glo's in Minneapolis in the Twin Cities area. So if you're like, hey, this like spray tan, or what do you call it? You called it something different, didn't you? Did you call it?
Yeah, it's a spray tan.
Like
I mean, it's we like to say it's not a spray tan. It's a Go-Glo, but it falls in the same realm.
So let's say you hear something like that, and you're like, that's interesting. And then you Google it and you're like, Go-Glo, Minneapolis, you should pull up their corporate locations or locations near where their corporate headquarters are. Then go on to Yelp or whatever it is, online reviews, to start looking at what their customers say. And if they don't have good ratings on that, that's probably a red flag. Let's say they have good ratings, and then you just start to dive into that deeper, and I'll start to understand the industry a little bit. Look at some of the different competitors out there in all of these different brands. And so this is the online research part of things. As a looker or a buyer, you're out there researching online. You can't believe everything you hear online either. I mean, you can't do that. You don't look at a bad review and be like, oh my gosh, I got one bad review out of 1,000. I'm not touching that. Like, that's a really good thing. You look to see if they have any kind of data around anything around customer support, anything around just how happy their customers are. They're raving fans. You just want the customers to be raving fans. That's a good sign. So you do online research.
A net promoter score.
Net promoter score. That's what I was. You knew I was thinking about that. I just couldn't get out of my brain. The net promoter score. And if they don't have it, they should. They should look at getting that. It's not hard to get a net promoter score. But then, then they really understand their own brand. So you want to see what their net promoter score is. And then I'd do some research on the industry in general. If it's spray tan, if it's cookies, if it's whatever, start to understand that industry. So you're just educating yourself. And you might find out, like, I don't like that industry. I don't want to be in that industry, and the different reasons why. The other thing, let's say you are in your hometown, you're like, or you're out on vacation somewhere, and you go into a store and you're like, this is cool. They make soap, and people are pretty happy in these stores, and there's a lot of customers in there, and then you go and Google soap franchises. That's a thing to Google soap franchises and see what comes up. And again, just because it's a franchise doesn't mean it's going to be awesome. But then you start to see what's out there in that world, and you start to understand it. And again, do the same thing. Look at their customers and look at what they're putting out there online, and then start to think about, well, I wonder what the owner does in this store. And this is for all brands. Like, just because there's a widget that they sell, there's a service that they do, there's a thing that happens inside the business. What's the owner's involvement? Because I know, like at Magnolia, the owner they don't have a ton of employees. And so you start to think, like, is there a bunch of employees in this store? And if there's not, that might be a good thing for you. It might not be a good thing, depending on what you want out of the business. So when I'm thinking online research, that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think, you hit on a really good point there. That's really what they should be doing. You should be doing that. Like, if you find a concept you really like and there's not a franchise you're aware of, like, Google it. Like, there may be a great concept that it opens your eyes to an industry you weren't aware of windows or doors or, making soap, whatever it may, spray tans. It could be anything. So keep your eyes open there, but then also just on, like, even some of the, like, portals, like, do some research, look at the Entrepreneur magazine, et cetera. But again,
be careful.
Like,
what do you need to be careful with that online research? You can't put your email address in.
Yeah.
You put your email address in, you are going to hate yourself.
You're going to get blown up. Yeah, you're going to get blown up. It's like saying you want a new mortgage or you want to buy a car. You put your number in and you're going to get blown up by hundreds of people. So don't do that until you're ready. Or I'd recommend going to the brand's actual franchise website. If you like a concept, don't put your name in any portal. Go look at the brand's website.
Portals are going to hate hearing this.
Them.
The portal sellers are going to hate this. But the reason is because of a lead comes in through the website, a franchisor will place high priority on that because they're like, they actually took the time, they visited our website, they didn't put it into some portal or lead magnet, and they give a lot of priority to a lead that comes in on on that brand's website.
Yeah, exactly. If it comes directly, that's a whole nother story. But so, finding those brands, again, there's things like Entrepreneur Magazine has a list. Again, take it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Right. Some of these portals, some of these are pay to play.
Yes.
But it gets you ideas of what else is out there. And so again,
that's right.
Just like anything, whether you're working with a broker, like if you find a concept you want to look at, you like, go directly to their website, or if you're working with a broker, they'll make that introduction so you get priority as well. But then go through the process and talk to franchisees. I think that's a key thing. But look in your local community. There might be Facebook groups. There might be other franchises. Like, ask the owner if there's a location in your area. Again, I always caution this, but if there's a brand that you really like, there's a Magnolia or a Go Glow in your backyard, and you really want to open one, and it's a franchise location, I personally would not tell them that you're looking at opening a franchise. Because if I'm that existing franchisee and somebody says, oh, I want to buy a franchise, I'm calling corporate and not picking up that territory. Yep. You're not taking my backyard.
You see it happen. It happens. It absolutely happens.
It happens all the time. But so I would go in and secret shop them and ask, hey, like, I'm visiting from out of town.
Or go visit some place out of town. Story. Go actually visit the place out of town.
But yeah, like you can do all those things, even like become a customer, like see what the customer experience is from that consumer. And would that be an experience you think would be replicable in your model? But then, get a chance to talk to some of the owners. There's a lot of ways to really research online, but it also can be really overwhelming. That's why some people, they might know the industry they want to be in. I want to be in insulation. I want to be in health and beauty. I want to be in soap making. They know that already. There's a finite amount of franchises to look at in those categories. If they say, I want to be a business owner, I have no idea what I'm going to do, there are thousands of opportunities out there. So it can be overwhelming. That's why sometimes the value is in with a franchise broker or listening to some podcasts and find who are those founders that you really align with. We can talk all day long about the business model, but for emerging brands, a lot of the times you're buying into the founder and the founder's story, the founder's why. So make sure you align with them, that you understand each other too.
Let's talk about the entrepreneur, FBR, all these different lists. People get on and they're like, this list is awesome. This was ranked number 1. First of all, it's a lagging indicator. Like, they don't make those lists until like it's probably too late. Some of them do, but a lot of those lists, like you said, might be pay for play. I don't know all the ins and outs of that. Might be pay for play, or it might be like fastest growing, territories sold. And that is like, as a buyer, it's the last thing that you should care about. You should care that the franchisor is growing, but give me a break. Like, just because it's sold 100 or 200 or 300 or 500 in the last year, that's probably not, that's not a good thing or a bad thing necessarily. It could be a bad thing. Right. It could be a good thing if they are prepared for that growth, which most brands aren't prepared for it. But like, talk about that, Bobby. The lists that that people put so much weight into, and it makes me cringe.
They're good, and to your point, they serve a purpose. But just like any metric, if you're measuring a specific metric, a lot of those fastest growing is how many territories have they awarded, how many franchisees have they signed up. It's they'll say how many they've awarded or how many they have open. Right? Some brands can be phenomenal, but they're never going to make that list because they're brick and mortar, like both of our brands. They're not going to open nearly as quickly than if I'm a service-based business and I buy a truck and a van and I can open up 30 days from signing my franchise agreement. So to your point, it's a lagging indicator, and it only measures a very specific, it doesn't measure franchisee success. It doesn't measure, how much money they're making. That's what you're going to have to talk to franchisees that are looking at item 19 of an FDD for. So they're good. They can be good starting points for resources to show you what is out there. But again, take them with a grain of salt. Like, there are brands that I've been a part of that were top 10 in that list, right next to Dunkin' Donuts. We were not in the same realm of Dunkin' Donuts. We didn't, but from an uneducated perspective, you could come and say, oh, well, this is ranked right next to Dunkin' Donuts. This must be a great franchise concept. And in that brand's defense, they're phenomenal concept. They do great. Franchisees are doing really well. However, I also know ones on that list that I necessarily didn't work with, but I know they're not doing as well. I know franchisees in those systems. So while they might be growing fast and selling a lot of territories, that doesn't equate to success. So it can be a good tool to show you what is out there, but by no, stretch of the imagination should that be the end all be all for those lists. It's great. It's an accolade. Hooray. But it's also, it's marketing in a lot of perspective that there's a lot of great brands that don't apply to be on those lists. They might be the best concept out there, but they're not applying to be on there. So you might not see a Crumble. You might not see, some of the different types of orange theory may not be on there. They never
did. Yep.
Yeah. They were never on there because they just never participated in that. Someone has to submit those things. So again, yes, they can be good. However, with anything out there, take it with a grain of salt, do your due diligence. There's a lot of different ways to find the right franchise for you, whether it is going directly to a brand you already frequent or using a franchise consultant. There's a lot of good ways to do it. It's just be an educated buyer, whichever route you go.
Okay. We're going to wrap it up. Give us one little tidbit. I'm going to give mine. If you're out there looking to buy a franchise, because you want to buy one, and you might even be a looker, you're a franchise looker, you're a franchise buyer, find the brand that you're interested in. However, we gave you a bunch of different ways to find it, but let's say you're interested in that brand. Google that brand, find out who the founder is, put in the founder's name in Google and the word podcast, and listen to every podcast that founder was on, because at Front Street Equity Partners, we are looking at the founder and the brand. But most people just kind of skip past the founder and they're just looking at the brand and the numbers and listen to the salesperson. See what you think about that founder, because that founder is going to play a key role in your success as a franchisee. So that would be my one little thing that probably a lot of people don't do, but I would listen to 10, 20 hours of a podcast with that founder and make a list of what you like about them, their management style, their philosophy, just their background, what maybe some hard things that they've gone through, whatever it is. That's what I would do. Bobby, what's your little tip for all the buyers and the lookers out there?
Yeah, I think it's so important to come up with your compelling reason. What's your why? Start with why. Simon Sinek, an author, speaker, he has some really great videos if you guys look at his TED Talks, but start with why. Why am I doing this? What's my why? But on the flip side, I tell our
that is so fluffy. That is so fluffy.
Well, but what's your why not? I ask them,
that is
up with
not
your why
fluffy.
Not list.
That's good.
Because let's be honest, the why not are not going to go away. You're always going to have the fear, the doubt. I've signed more franchise agreements than I can count. However, you still ask yourself, can I do this? Will I do this? Am I willing to do what it takes? What are the pros and cons? But I call it the why and why not list, because if my compelling reason doesn't push me forward and my why nots are too loud, that's my gut telling me something. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's not the right time. Maybe it's not the right brand, but sometimes it's just not the right person. You may not be a good fit for franchise ownership. That's okay, but you got to be self-aware. So come up with your compelling reason and come up with a why and why not list for whatever brand you're looking for. And at the end of the day, if you go to a discovery day, a confirmation day, meet the team, whatever it may be, you're going to come back and you need to constantly review that list. What's my why? Why am I doing this? Because it's going to be scary. It's going to be intimidating. You're going to say, what the heck am I doing? All your friends and family members, you go to holidays, birthday parties, they're going to tell you, what are you doing? You're crazy. It always happens. But you got to go back to your list. And if that why not's too loud, my opinion is to listen to it. If your why is a compelling reason, it doesn't mean those why nots are going away. They're still going to be there until you've been in business and you've proven yourself right, that you made the right decision. But you got to choose what you're going to listen to and which one you're going to feed. If you feed the why not list and you're telling yourself why it's not going to work, probably not going to work. So come up with both of those lists and then determine what you need to know in order to make a decision. Come up with quantitative reasons of this is what I need to be able to make a decision, yes or no.
How high can you count?
Not high enough.
You said you've signed more than you can count. I was just curious if there's a number. If there was a number that you had.
I think it was in the 60s that I was a part of with our group. So it was a lot, and it didn't get any less scary every time we signed one. It was just, I've been here before, I've done it before. Like, so I think it was just shy of 70.
I have an idea. I want to see if you think this is a good idea or bad, and we're going to end with this. What if I did a podcast that we blacked out faces, like just blurred them out, maybe even disguise some voices, but I don't care about that, and brought in some different consultants, maybe like 4 different consultants, and just did like how to best work with consultants. Because so many candidates work with consultants, but they get on here, they will get a ton of business out of it. And I'm not going to let that happen. So what if we did that, like brought in a few brokers and consultants, and I just grilled them on like best ways to work with them, best practices and things like that. I think that might be kind of cool.
I love it. I think that the anonymous aspect makes it even that much more fun too.
Because they can be honest.
Because they're not going to pull any punches.
Yeah, exactly. All right. We'll get that going. All right, Bobby, this has been a good one. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.